So dramatic. The countdown to Matt Iseman. Matt, thanks for doing the show.
Tom, my pleasure, buddy. Appreciate you having me on.
Look, I didn't even know you. I knew you did Red Eye, but I didn't know you did Gutfeld.
Very early on with Red Eye. And I remember I did Gutfeld, down in Houston when they had the Super Bowl. It must have been 2018, 2017. And what a nuts. You know, the only bummer about it was I never got to go out drinking with Greg because I've heard the man can put him down.
Yes. Well, not so much lately. You know, we used to drink a lot of wine, me and Greg, but now when we go on the road, he's like, he wakes up and he's like, he's a fitness freak now.
What?
Yes, he wakes up, no wine after the show, wakes up and he does his Peloton. And yeah, I mean, you'd love it. He's
Is it because he's broadcasting 9 hours a day? Is that why he's now taking care of himself?
Yeah, I think he had to. So he's really kicked it up. It's great. So you must have done, that was the weekend show. Was that before it went nightly?
That was weekend. Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, it's great to have you on here. And
thanks, Tom.
I want people to kind of get the whole story because I know there's a lot of people. I'm sure, I like to broadcast these things live on Twitter, Instagram, and, all the Fox fans, but also whatever, just different people. And I have these guests on, and I think everyone knows everybody's story, but they don't. Nobody knows anything. So I want to kind of do your story because it's an amazing story. And like when we first met, I didn't know about your whole background. Your education, you're a doctor, so we're going to go through the whole thing. Do you mind?
I love it, Tom.
Okay. Good.
My favorite subject to talk about is me. It's amazing. That's why I'm in entertainment, buddy.
So I looked up your education. What are you? Columbia, Stanford, some other Ivy League?
Princeton and Columbia. Yeah.
Okay. Princeton and just Princeton and Columbia.
Yeah.
Come on.
On paper, I'm very smart, Tom.
Yeah. But then there was which was the medical school?
Columbia was for med school.
Okay. And then you're a doctor. So you get out of Columbia and you're a doctor. Like you're walking around being a doctor. What kind of doctor?
I was doing internal medicine. So I was doing my residency at the University of Colorado, which is where I grew up and where my dad was a professor. And I was doing internal medicine, which is kind of the catch-all, leads to various things like cardiology, infectious disease. And I loved med school, loved the challenge of it. But when I got into the day-to-day existence of being in the hospital, I realized it's not a job. It's a calling. It is such a consuming profession with healthcare, particularly when you're in training and you're in the hospital, 100 hours a week. And when you're not, you're researching, you're looking up the latest treatments. And ultimately, people are placing their lives in your hands. And there were times when I was just like, listen, I want to get out of here. I want to go play Legend of Zelda. I want to go drink with my friends. I want to go snowboard. I want to go lead a life. I want to do anything but go get into a textbook. And it was just I just had this feeling that I was going to miss something and it was going to cost someone their life. And I just had this feeling of my entire life would then be consumed by this guilt, like some Chekhov play or something. So that's when I said, all right, I got to figure things out. And that's when I decided to take a year off and kind of recalibrate where my life was going.
Yeah. So how long were you a doctor?
Well, 1 year.
Yeah.
1 year I did internship and it wasn't as though I walked away and came to entertainment as though this is it. I found what I meant to do.
Yeah.
When I took time off, I thought, look, growing up, I just did sports in school and just worked. And I thought, you know what? I've never really just kind of evaluated my life. So, be a ski bum, travel, do something to kind of clear your mind. And I thought, I'll do stand-up comedy. I'd done it a handful of times in med school in New York. And so I thought that's as opposite, as the polar opposite of everything I've done in my life. And I thought it would kind of clear my head. And I thought I would grow up and come back to medicine as a mature adult. Instead, here I am 25 years later, still doing this.
Yeah. I mean, so you did some stand-up while you were at med school. How do you do that? I mean, I get this impression med school, it's like everyone's sleeping, a couple of hours a night. They got so how did you find time to
It really was, it's so many things happen in a hospital. And I know police or any first responders, people can relate, soldiers, where there's, you develop a kind of gallows humor as a reflex where you're dealing with such high emotion, high stress situations that either you laugh, cry, get angry. And I would always choose laughter. And it wasn't, I don't talk about what happens in the hospital much because I was escaping it, but it was just this kind of thing where I'm like, I need some outlet. I need something to kind of get all the tension out. And I had a buddy who was doing open mics and who was bringing me actually to bringer shows. I was his audience. Yeah. And it looked like he was having so much fun. He's like, you should try this. And I did it. The first show I ever did, I think it was the New York Comedy Club, which was like 2nd and 20th back when it existed. And it was a bringer show. And I brought 60 people. So I went last. It was like 3.5 hours. And Tom, I still think the first set I ever did in comedy was one of my best.
Yes.
It's just magical. And then cut to 2 weeks later, I did the Boston Comedy Club, which I think is it still there on 3rd?
Boston, I don't think it's still there. No.
And so I remember, Tom, and I bombed so bad, and I watched the tape, and I was doing that nervous tick where you grab the microphone cable and you'd whip it like Indiana Jones. And you couldn't hear an audience member, but you could just hear that cable going clack, 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 snapping on the floor. And I thought, this is what I'm meant to do.
Boston was tough. And, it was like they were sitting at the back. There'd be a couple of people at the tables, but the comics would be sitting on that back bench looking at you.
Yeah.
And so when you'd bomb in front of other comics, I can remember one time, now this shows you how long ago it was at Boston, but I'm up there and I say my joke and I can't even see anyone in the audience. I'm just seeing the tables and you see people back there like the tops of their heads, because it's so dim. And I said something and didn't get a laugh, but someone's just applauding. I just hear this, right? And I was like, oh, I wonder who likes my bit. And I'm looking and I see that they're just opening their cigarettes. They're just kind of, they're packing their tobacco.
This is a thing that you explain to people in comedy, but the funniest thing to another comic is seeing their friend go up there and have a joke bomb.
Yeah.
And that's why you'll get like that 2 seconds of laughter where they wait, nobody laughed, and they're laughing at you. And you feel that shame, that humiliation that they're really going for with it.
Yeah. And so you're on the Columbia's Upper West Side. So did you ever do stand-up New York up there?
No. I don't even think stand-up New York exists. So this was the mid 90s. Or at least I wasn't getting it. The first open mic I did was the West End Gate, which was a bar at like 110th or 112th on Broadway.
Oh, yeah.
And so I did it a handful of times, and then I did a couple times in Denver. I was doing my residency, and so what was great was I would do the open mic at Comedy Works, and that downtown Comedy Works, which I still think that's one of the best rooms in the country. It's just explosive.
Everybody loves it.
You're doing an open mic there and it's still, the room's at least half, 2/3 full. It was incredible. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, open mics are great. And then I move out to LA and, you're performing in the back of a hookah bar and nobody's listening. But I will say, so when I moved out to LA, I just, got the newspaper. I was just going to open mics 5 or 6 nights a week. And it was awful, but there was something inside of me that kind of clicked that said, I think this is what I'm meant to do. And so just kind of stumbled my way through it and got very lucky early on to get into commercials, national commercials, when they paid well. And so for, a medical resident, I think I was making $31,000 a year. And, by the time I started booking national commercials, I was making 6 figures. So it was crazy. Within a couple months, I'm like, I'm making so much more money than I did as a doctor in training. Yeah. Nobody's dying. There's no call. And I love what I'm doing. And so I was lucky to kind of be able to find a way to support myself and get enough positive feedback where I'm like, I'm not going back to medicine. Because I kind of, when I went out there, I set some goals, because the last thing I wanted to do was wake up 5 years later and be like, I haven't, entertainment's not working out. And I kind of missed the window then to go back to medicine. So I kind of, set a whole bunch of goals in terms of earning or accomplishments and achievements. And I just kept meeting them. So it was easy to kind of justify staying out. And thank God it worked out.
Yeah. So you were running around. I mean, this is obviously LA. I only spent 1 year in LA around 95. I went out for pilot season. I ended up staying there for the whole year.
Yeah.
But I was getting out for commercials there. And it's a little bit of a different game in LA. It was like
Yeah.
there was just more people, like
Yeah.
all the calls. And, like if they wanted like Native Americans in New York, there's like maybe like one or two guys, like the Indian chief type of guy who gets all those roles. You go to LA and there's like a bunch of Indians with it's like unbelievable.
Oh God. I remember I went to some commercial audition. They were looking for like a football player and I didn't get it, but I remember the guy next to me was this wrestler guy and he was super intense. And I remember they were like, say your name. I'm like, I'm Matt Eisen. They go, what's your name? He's like, I'm Prototype. And then I like followed this guy for a while. I watched him. It was John Cena. John Cena. It was his early iteration of one of his characters.
He was Prototype.
It was Prototype or something, or something like that. And I just remember seeing him and going, I don't know, that guy's got because even then he was just jacked.
Yeah.
And it's cool. It's interesting as you go through this business, and you've been in it a long time, where you see enough people kind of stop and start and things explode. And then there are certain people you just kind of witness early on and go, I think they got something. And then all of a sudden, people are blowing up.
Amazing.
Kevin Hart, I'm sure you were around with Kevin Hart, and it's just amazing to see a guy where you're like, that guy is, and credit to him, he just has worked his ass off.
Yeah. But you remember when he was on Tough Crowd and they made fun of him? They were like, shut up. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
They treated him.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And they still do. Like those friends, Norton and those guys, Bobby Kelly, they'll all shit on. But if they have a role in the movie, they'll kiss his ass. But
yeah, exactly. I know. Now they're all like, oh, help me out, buddy. Okay, so let's play a game called Look at Matt's IMDb, right? Well, look, we got like a lingerie ad in there. So let's take a look. We're going to start with with General Hospital. So that was your General Hospital was the first gig for you? That's amazing.
That was my first. So I didn't remember. I knew someone who got me in for a casting call. And again, I'm a doctor, Tom. Mm-hmm. So I think this is great. I brought my white coat when I went. It wasn't even an audition. I met with the casting director, brought my white coat, and I was like, I could do some medical stuff. And they cast me as this guy, Rock Fowler, who was a henchman for Courtney, oh God, I can't remember her name. But I kidnapped Carly Corinthos. This was my big moment. I literally poured substance into her drink, watched her drink it, and then carried her out of a bar on my shoulder. And the episode aired on Valentine's Day, which was just magical for the women to be like, hey, I'm on General Hospital, but I don't think you should watch the episode. And to tell you what a good actor I was, Tom, they came up to me and they go, you're a bad guy, but you like being bad. Yeah. So in the scene, I'm talking to the girl and I'm just smiling. I'm like, I hear you want to get back at Carly. And he's like, and then they didn't say anything, but the next week I was dead in a dumpster. So I think that was the feedback on my.
Oh, the characters died.
I died in a dumpster. I don't know if they had more plans or if I was just expendable. And I didn't even get a death scene. I didn't get why? Rick? Yeah. It was just one scene. They just opened the dumpster and I had to lie there with blood on my head. Oh my God. It was a humiliating moment. And yet it was still one of the proudest of my early career.
What year was that?
I think that was like 2002.
I can't see because on the IMDb it just says 1963.
And here's what was crazy, Tom. Like I've done like sitcoms or commercial. Like a commercial, you will shoot 2 days for 30 seconds. Yeah. And in a soap opera, you're doing a full episode a day, and these people shoot 5 days a week, so they'll get 10 to 30 pages each. Of dialogue that they have to learn. So it's amazing where you see soap opera acting isn't necessarily the best, but my God, they are churning it out. And I remember the director was like, you get one take, maybe two. And so it's not about it being great, but it's like, don't mess it up was really the take home.
I'm trying to get the thing so I can see it here. Okay, let's just, so that was like early 2000s basically. Yeah. And you might have been, I'm just thinking, General Hospital, they have a history of turning sexual assault into remember Luke and Laura?
Yeah.
Like, that was, you could have, that could have been a budding romance.
Tom, you wouldn't believe the scenarios I had in my head that I was ready to go to the people with, like, no, Rock Fowler becomes the new head of Salem. It's all these plans, and they said no. They decided no, you are dead.
I like this because it almost, the first three IMDb, these are your characters: Rock Fowler, and then the Hammer, and then Reaper Gray. So the Hammer, that was on Drew Carey's show.
So that, and the Drew Carey show, actually, that one, I don't know why they're in this order. Drew Carey was the very first thing I did.
Okay.
And that one was a friend of my dad was on the show. She was a guest star, and they were doing a softball scene. And she's like, hey, we need ringers. And I'd played baseball in college. She's like, why don't you come out? And so that was my very first paying gig in Hollywood, was Drew Carey show. And it was just as an extra. And, but the guy who repped all the other baseball players came up and said, do you have an agent? And I didn't. And so he became my agent, and he's the one who got me into the national commercial. So the Drew Carey show was kind of the first big break, where just going in as a non-speaking extra. I did get one thing where I got to swing drunk and fall over, and that led off my acting reel for many years, Tom.
Oh, yes, a great sight gag.
The physical comedy was off the charts. It was I Love Lucy levels of goodness. But it was cool, and it was fun because that Drew Carey show was huge back then, and everyone was just lovely. And it's really interesting when you see a show that's super successful and everyone's happy. Yeah. Because I'm sure, you've experienced it too in Hollywood. Sometimes for such a fun profession, people can be miserable pricks.
Yes. And you notice that just like one day on the set, and you notice it, you can tell like the vibe,
It's such a top-down thing. And it's so interesting when you see the people, and I don't know. I mean, it really seems like it's changing. That Hollywood has grown far less tolerant of it, but there are still people who are just don't belong in society. They're so angry.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing that anyone thinks they can get away with it now, but apparently, you still can in some contexts. So the Undeserted, that was where you were Reaper Gray.
That was a short film, and the guy who was doing it was best known in The Bodyguard with Kevin Costner and Whitney Houston. He was the one who they thought was the killer, and he wasn't. And from that, he parlayed it into a short film, The Undeserted, where I played a Reaper who stood in the middle of the road in Griffith Park, and another unspeaking role, non-verbal, no lines.
Okay,
which again lets you know where I stand in the acting.
Well, you got to put it, but it's like at those days, you're just trying to fill the resume.
Oh my God. Yes.
I mean, I'm assuming you're making a living now in commercials, but you're just trying to get these other gigs, to get the career going, right?
Yeah. When you're going up, nobody lists a credit. He was in a Lamisil commercial.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear that.
I mean, did it help with the perception that, for me, I feel like I was getting out for commercials, and, I did a promo for Comedy Central that was like, it was like a promo. They paid me like $300 to do it, but it was Comedy Central. So I'm running around doing spots in New York, and I'm on the Comedy Central promo. So like when the club owners they're watching Comedy Central all the time. So they see me standing there with the Comedy Central logo. And so there was this perception that something was going well for me, and then it helped me get spots. You know what I mean?
Yes. Honestly, it's crazy. I don't think any of the shows I've done have really lent themselves to a big stand-up. I mean, Ninja Warrior, we have season 16 coming out this June. Yeah. But you watch the show, we're not funny. It's a very earnest, very sincere show. There's not a lot of comedy. And people, when I just was headlining the Punchline in Atlanta, and people came out and they're like, I had no idea you told jokes.
Yeah. Yeah. They were I just want to see him because they watch the show. I mean, but people are big fans of the show, and they just want to come and, I think I'm sure people are very attached to you from that show, right? From that role. It's
been nice. I think, it's just crazy because I started in 2010 on the second season of the show when it was on G4, a network that doesn't exist. And literally they called me and they're like, hey, look, it's 10 episodes. We're not sure all of them will air.
Yeah.
But good luck. And we did this show and just kind of it has watched it grow into something that now, there are gyms all around the country. There are multiple leagues that exist outside of the show where people are doing it. And it's been really cool to see, we've had people get married. We've had people had kids. We've had generations compete on the show. And so it's really been awesome to get to be a part of something that has become part of the fabric of pop culture. Yeah. And it's nice too, because my mom's always like, I'm not embarrassed to tell people that you're on this show, which I can't. Yeah. I don't know what that says about other stuff I've done.
Well, I mean, it's a family show too. I mean, my kids loved it. We grew up watching, because you look for things you can watch as a family, right? And that's one of them. And they loved it. They loved The Amazing Race as well.
Yeah.
So there's things like that they watched The Amazing Race, and a couple of the Globetrotters were on, doing the Celebrity Amazing Race or something, And so when I was interviewing them at Fox, my kids were so excited to meet them. So they came down and they met them, and they just knew them as contestants on The Amazing Race. But to them, that was like a top celebrity to meet,
It's really interesting. And I think we're seeing it more now as we're kind of on the other side of this younger generation that doesn't know people from TV and film. They know them from TikTok or Insta or social media seems to be a much bigger influencer. And it's just, we're watching this unfold as broadcast traditional mediums are dying on the vine, and kind of this new, whether it's social media or streaming, it feels like we're at this big point in the industry where there's a big shift happening, but nobody kind of knows the exact direction it's going in. So it's interesting, being in on NBC now for the past 15 years, and just seeing broadcast really struggle to connect with young viewers. So I don't know. I think we're at an interesting point, and seeing how, content's always king, but where are they going to get it? Is it what form? Is it going to be these increasingly short form? But we're seeing now people really like the Joe Rogan 3-hour podcast. So yep. I think we're at the business at a very interesting time, but I have no idea what's about to happen. Yeah.
And it's interesting that, a lot of the problems, like with the writer's strike and everything, we both know people who are writers and they make their living doing those, episodic series and things like that. The way that the business is now, the thing that was killing the writers is all these shows that are like having seasons that are 4 or 6 episodes, because that's the way they do it on streaming, However, as a consumer, I kind of I love those British shows, where they kind of hit you with 6 episodes and you can kind of plow through them, So then, it's like those writers, they were, their whole business model was get hired, get a whole season with, whatever it was, I don't know, 32 episodes or whatever a normal season was. And they could kind of like be set for the whole year. Now they're like, they hire them, boom, small staff, and then they're out the door. So it's hard for them to make a living. But yeah, you're right. It's like the opportunities, obviously, for all kinds of different stuff is there, right?
And it is interesting because this last strike, a lot of it had to do with AI, and every day I'm astounded at how advanced it's getting, where it can generate images.
Yeah,
where I'm like, my God, that looks like me. That sounds like me. Where how long before you just create like, oh, I want Muhammad Ali to host a cartoon show, and 30 seconds later you have a whole season of it generated. Granted, it's mostly shit and they can't do fingers or jokes, but it's not far removed. It's interesting to see this kind of, as this comes up, and the idea of, generating automated scripts or automated jokes. And it's not there yet, but it is an interesting time with this idea of, how do we become irreplaceable?
Yeah, I mean, I bet has anyone done a deep fake of you doing the play-by-play for
American God, I haven't seen it yet, but they've done like Lego things, and I've been amazed at what did I just we did a promo and we were up at Howie Mandel's offices where he's involved with this technology called Portal, and I don't know if you saw the the NFL draft, when Caleb Williams was introduced in Chicago, he appeared holographically. And so what they're like these Doctor Who phone booth things, and you get filmed in Burbank and you can appear instantly in Chicago. And it's, I was standing in front of it watching it, but what they can do is they had an actor get up there and speak for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And then the actor appeared and they're like, all right, ask him a question, ask him anything. And I was like, when's the next solar eclipse? And it was William Shatner. And all of a sudden, William Shatner is there like, well, the next solar eclipse could be viewed in Iceland in 2028. But they're, in America. And it's just unbelievable where you're like, I'm watching it, 2 feet from it, Tom. And I'm like, I could tell it wasn't really Shatner saying it.
Yeah.
But it was really close.
Yeah.
and it's just astounding to think like they could get him to say anything from just 3 minutes of training. And when you look at how much content, like how much video footage, audio footage of you is there that they could train on something, and all of a sudden, like, God damn, that does sound like me.
Well, yeah, and I mean, they could train it on your performance on American Ninja Warrior. It's so heightened, and that voice and the excitement. So they could. I bet a machine would be all over that.
And it's not going to get hoarse. Yeah, it's not going to stay. I just don't feel like calling a race today.
It's unbelievable. Okay, so let's go quickly through some of these other ones, because at this point we're on the Drew Carey show. So you're still looking for that thing. I'm assuming you got your agent, and the agent is like, they want to get you a pilot, right? So, but you're kind of doing a day here, a day there, right?
Yeah.
Are you going out for pilot? Any big pilots that you didn't get?
Probably the biggest acting audition I ever got was for Joey when they were doing the Matt LeBlanc spinoff from Friends.
Yeah.
And I got that. And it was because I was doing stuff at the Groundlings right then. And Jennifer Coolidge, who was a Groundlings member, saw me and goes, oh, I think you'd be good for this. And God bless her. She called me over, coached me on it and everything. And I went in and it ended up going to, oh my God, it's the guy from Joanna Man, Miguel. I'm blocking his name. But I was into the final 5.
Oh yeah.
And I was just, I remember being so terrified. And I watched Miguel. It was so interesting too, because he's the one who ended up getting it. But he walked out of his audition. He goes, "You guys might as well just go home because they fucking love me." And I was like, "He's playing head games."
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. I was like, I didn't say. I'm like, and it worked because I was like, "Oh yeah, it probably is anyway." But it's so fascinating just seeing, that it is. We all make it out as this. Oh, we're all in it together. But at certain points, it becomes very cutthroat.
Oh yeah, certainly when you get down to the end there and you go in there and the producers are there. And how about with commercials? I've always thought the kiss of death was when the director kind of comes up to you and whispers that you're his favorite.
Oh,
like, why are you whispering that to me? Obviously, I'm not the favorite of the people on the other side of the room.
Right. I liked you. No, isn't it the worst time when you're sitting there outside an audition room and you hear someone and they're killing in there. And you hear the crowds laughing and then they do it again. I remember I followed Joel McHale for an audition on something. He must have been in there for 35 minutes. He opened the door and people are just like, Joel's amazing. I go in, I was done in 2.5 minutes. Listen, I know it too. I would go with Joel. You just had to bring me in. I'll just see myself out. It's interesting. It's what a head game it is to try to get in your space. And it is. It's like, hey, you follow someone bad, you look good, and the opposite is true. What an interesting business we're in. But the thing that blows me away is you just never know what's going to hit. Again, when they offered me Ninja Warrior, I was on a home makeover show, Clean House, and I was doing the spinoff of the Soup, Joel McHale show. I was doing the Sports Soup, the version of it on Versus. So I had 2 shows. It was like, this is crazy. And I got a 3rd show and it was like, oh, this thing, great, for a summer. And both those shows went away. Both those networks went away. And Ninja's the one that has kept going. And it's, countless times there have been things in my career where you think, this is it. This is going to be the thing that launches me. And it just goes away. And then something very tiny happens and it's the one that gets you the gig. And it's just such when I talk to people about this business, I think the work isn't the tough part. The tough part is in between jobs. The tough part is dealing with, hey, you're great, but your ratings were bad last week. If they don't pick up, you're canceled, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so it's that kind of fickle nature that we sign up for with this job, is that it's so fleeting. It can just go away at any time. But boy,
yeah. So now you're I'm going to Courting Alex. That's the Jenna Elfman.
Ah,
I don't even remember that. So that was a show.
it was a 1-season show, and I got to go on, and it was a guy from Ed, and it was interesting because, again, I still wasn't focused on acting. I was much more focused on comedy and sketch, and thinking that was where it was going to be. But I remember, so for those who don't know, particularly in a multicam sitcom, it's kind of a 5-day cycle. You go in and you'll do a table read on the very first day, and a lot of people are reading it cold. But I watched Jenna Elfman come in, and particularly compared to the other people on the show, and like Stacy Keach was on it, and he was good. But like Jenna, clearly, not only she know her lines, she made all these like really interesting. She was funny, and I was just like, oh, that's what a star looks like.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I could see like the person opposite her was just reading and putting, and he hadn't put the work in, and just like, oh, you see the difference between people who work hard, who are talented, and it was just interesting, I think, to get a glimpse at someone who'd done Dharma and Greg, who'd been in a wildly successful sitcom, and just seeing like, oh, I could see why people use her, because she comes in and just knocks it out of the park every time.
Yeah, I remember when that show was first on, Dharma and Greg, and she was unknown, and it's like, who is this woman?
Yeah,
and she was so funny, and so good. And then she kind of like, she did movies and everything like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, she was always great. So that, but again, it's kind of like Joey. It was like was Joey 1 season, or?
I think Joey was 1 or 2. Yeah. And that's the other thing people too don't like. Listen, getting on the air is a home run. More than a season is a grand slam, right? Like most shows, most things you get put into never even see the light of day.
Yeah.
And it's such a tough thing, like not letting your hopes get up too high so they're not dashed, but at the same time enjoying the moment. And it's been interesting, I think, being, having been at lots of different levels in entertainment, and seeing kind of how the pressures that come with each, and how people handle it wildly differently.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the idea of like the pilot season, when I was thinking, if I can only get a pilot, I'm going to be all set, but this thing of like, you do a pilot and then you can't do anything else because you're tied to that show until, and then you got to wait and see if it goes. So people, there's very, very good actors or actresses that they would book a pilot every year for like 4 years. And still, they've never been on the air, but they're super successful because they keep booking pilots, entire careers go by that way, where the projects just don't get off the ground, but you
never got the right one.
Do tons of things at a time.
Yeah. It is. It's I don't know. I don't know about you. I don't know that I ever had like a real concrete strategy on how to attack the business. My thing was always like, I just tried to say yes to everything, hoping that it would, one thing led to the, and I will say that's the thing I noticed was a lot of my opportunities have come because I'd known someone before, I'd worked with them before on something that didn't work.
Yeah.
And you were professional and easy to work with, and they bring you back. And it is a marathon business. You have low points.
Well, so you book American Ninja Warrior, and it's like this cable show on a network that so you're thinking, oh, this is just some cable show, I'm going to do it and get out of there. When did it took a year and then it got picked up by NBC?
What happened was it was G4, which was like the video game network back then. Mm-hmm. And that was owned by Comcast. Comcast owned Style E Versus, which became Versus. Oh my God. It was NBC Sports. It became NBC Sports, and then G4 and Style. And only E remains of those. But Comcast owned them. Comcast buys NBC during the third season of the show. And so what happens is the guy who runs G4 goes to NBC and says, we've got this show that's doing very well for us. We want to put the finale on NBC. And all we ask is that you tell people that you can watch other episodes on G4.
Mhm.
And so they threw it through the finale of Ninja season 3 on NBC, no promotion, and it ended up winning the night.
Yeah.
And so NBC said, all right, we want to, and so initially for 2 seasons, we split between NBC and G4. So half an episode would air Sunday on G4, and then it would conclude on NBC on Monday nights. And then
I kind of remembered that. That's right.
It was bananas. It just hadn't happened. And then G4 went away. So, and it became the Esquire channel, but they were like, Ninja doesn't fit in. So we then go full-time NBC. I think that was season 6 or 7. And then we became, shows don't go from cable to network. It was just this ridiculous opportunity. And then to do well, and we ended up getting nominated for Emmys, and we're now in our 16th season. It was one of those things that, and it was a slow build. And I think we kind of had the grace of taking our lumps on cable before we got to NBC. So we were a little more polished show. And we've seen NBC has since tried to kind of replicate it with, Spartan games or Titan games. And they're bringing back Gladiators. And they've done a number of kind of shows that were similar, but they just haven't been able to replicate it. But it's, we kind of came out and we made Wipeout obsolete. If you remember the show Wipeout, even it has now come back, but it was kind of goofy, and our show was very similar, but ours was serious. And so, eventually something will come out and we'll be relegated to the scrap heap, but I'm hoping not soon.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing that it's quite a run. And I think I didn't even know that Wipeout was before American Ninja Warrior, but you know what it had though? It's the secret to American Ninja Warrior is those stories.
Yes.
It's the personal stories and the families looking on. That's the whole deal. And I think Wipeout was just like, they wiped out. Right? Yeah.
Well, it was, and they didn't really tell a backstory, and it was kind of the same people, and it was more the joke. And our show, it very much follows the Olympic formula where, you're watching curling, you don't care. But if you see it's, Matt Hamilton, this guy, he worked at a bar, he shovels snow, and, he works at UPS, and they're giving him time out here. You're like, oh, come on, Matt, let's win this thing. And so I think we've gotten, and our showrunners actually who took over, I think in season 9, both of them came from like CNN and hard journalism. So they were excellent documentary and excellent storytellers. Yeah. And so I think that's one of the things that Ninja's done. And you've seen it too with The Voice and AGT, where NBC is very much, when AGT came out, Jerry Springer was hosting it, and David Hasselhoff was one of the judges, and Elon Gold, and it was a gong show. Yeah. And then now it's become this very serious talent show. And it's, again, like our show, they're very earnest in the storytelling, and they found this is what works. People want a reason to care about someone and cheer for them throughout the time they're watching.
Yeah, when you go back to their house and you see like the courses they built with their, their homemade equipment, it's incredible,
I feel like so lazy, Tom. I feel so out of shape. They eat well, they take care of their bodies.
Well, now you're a jock. Have you done the courses? Have you done anything? Can you get up on the salmon ladder? What have you done?
So the last 2 times I've tried the course, I broke my foot and broke my ankle. and it's one of those things, like I used to be an athlete, and I'm a bigger guy. And it's definitely a course made for smaller people. But the problem is, like, the time I broke my foot, we were in Vegas. We'd been shooting for a week, like all night. And this was at the final night. The sun's coming up. We've been on our feet for 12 hours, drinking Cuban coffees and having Reese's. And like, now I will try to be athletic. Yeah. And one move, my foot snapped. I'm in the water. And, and the worst part is, like, they were like, don't do it. You're going to get hurt. So I'm underwater, just like, ow. But I'm like, I can't go up and let them know they were right. Yeah. So you're like, wasn't that funny? I'm fine. Can somebody please help me out of this pool, because I can't get out on my own.
Oh, it's terrible. But yeah, it's true. It's amazing how, it's obviously these things are impossible. Those, like the salmon ladders, the whatever. What's the hardest thing
anything grip strength for me? We had the ultimate cliffhanger on stage through where you're going fingertips. But we started out, it was age 21 used to be the requirement. Then we did a college Ninja Warrior, and the kids were good. We're like, all right, we'll lower it to 19. We had Ninja Warrior Junior for kids 9 to 14, and they were so good. And so we decided we're going to lower the age for a couple athletes. So we lowered it to 15. And all of a sudden, these kids have taken over. And I liken it to if anyone watched MMA at the beginning, when it started out, it really was a wrestler against someone who does karate, against a bare knuckle boxer. And they didn't have any crossover skills. But then people would start to train these other things. Eventually, you had people who grew up doing MMA, training jiu-jitsu, wrestling, all of it. That's what we've seen in Ninja Warriors. Now, they're kids who've grown up, not as basketball players or soccer players or football players, grown up doing Ninja Warrior. And these kids are so good. The videos I see online of what they're able to do, they're lashing, they're leaping through the air 10 feet with a little pole and putting it through like a ring that's slightly larger than the diameter of the pole they're holding. The precision and strength in their motors go forever. And I just feel like such an old, out of shape dump of a
kid. It's unbelievable. I can't even think of it. It's like because I think a lot of people, they see it at first and like, well, I could probably do that thing. I could probably do that. I don't think I could do that, but I could, and it's like, no, you couldn't do any of it.
Well, we all think we're athletes from the comfort of our couch, and I'm from the host tower. And then you get there, you're like, this is not going to end well for me.
Well, you've also got you've got RA, right? That's like one of your big. You're like you've done.
I'm a gimp. I have rheumatoid arthritis. I've had it since 2002, and I'm lucky. I got on a biologic drug. These are these new kind of wonder drugs for autoimmune diseases, and it's worked so well for me.
So what is it? What's rheumatoid arthritis is like? Everything's autoimmune, right? I mean, everything from like skin conditions, Crohn's, right? It's all immune.
Ulcerative colitis, psoriasis. There are all kinds of these autoimmune diseases, and there's the people have talked. There has been an uptick, since vaccines, that there may be, because those were immune system related. People have, there's speculation that this has triggered some autoimmune conditions. Obviously, in my case, so what it turned out was my mom and dad, neither of them had it, but together they created a gene that my brother and I both have that predisposes towards these autoimmune conditions. So we've been in studies and as they try to figure out exactly DNA wise what's going on. But I responded to these biologic drugs that modify your immune system, and I had a pretty severe case, pretty aggressive case, and I started this treatment, and it was like it stopped. And there was damage that was done, so I'm not doing ballet or anything. But it's been pretty amazing seeing that now, 22 years after my diagnosis, the disease really hasn't progressed. So I've been very fortunate. But that's, I do a lot of work with the Arthritis Foundation for that reason, because I was diagnosed in 2002. The medication I was on was only approved 4 years before. It was the first of its kind. And before that, the treatment was like these heavy metals and things where the side effects of the treatment were as bad as the disease itself. So I'm very fortunate in trying to encourage them to develop the next generation of drugs for people who don't respond to the biologics or, for whatever other autoimmune conditions there are. So this is how I feel. I'm not a doctor, Tom, but I still like to give back to the medical community.
Well, I mean, aren't you kind of a doctor? I mean, you went to medical school and then you became a doctor.
Technically, I am. Yeah, you're a doc. Like through the title, I am a doctor, but I always felt my dad was a doc, and I always kind of felt like that. It's like you call people doctors who are saving lives.
Yeah,
like that's kind of my barometer. So Dr. Joe Biden, I'm like, well,
yeah, exactly,
sure, but not really.
So does your audience, like you mentioned when you were out playing the comedy club, some of the audience was like, oh, we didn't even know you do this.
Yeah.
Is there a lot of people who have the impression that like, oh, this American Ninja Warrior guy came in and now he thinks he can run, do stand up? Like they think you started after
I don't know. That's a good question. I think usually, I like to think I'm funny enough that they go, okay, he's done comedy before. But I'm also like, I know people who've gotten big and then got into stand up, and I'm like, man, as long as you're delivering, be funny. It's interesting because I'm sure you've seen it too, where clubs are selling out to TikTokers or things where it's like, and these are people who are like, you're very funny in your format in 90-second bursts, but to do 45 minutes or an hour, you really struggle. Yeah. So I don't know. I think, I find the greatest, challenge. You have to have talent, but then people have to know about you. And it is one of the things that I'm still not great at is the relentless self-marketing that you have to do as part of this career, because, you can't, our job is to educate people on it. And I've been lucky because I did Celebrity Apprentice with Schwarzenegger. We've become buddies, and talk about a guy who, is still, he just was promoting his book, traveled the world to go promote it. And in his book, he talks about, like, if you're a part of a project, your job is to get out there and sell it and sell this thing, go everywhere. And it's interesting watching someone like him, who's a global icon. You're like, oh, there's a reason. Yeah. Because he would go everywhere. Every project he was in, he's like, well, I'll do every press tour. I will travel the country. Anything you think of, I will do that and more, because I want these projects to succeed, because it means I succeed as well. And that's an area where I'm still not great on social media. It is such a 24, it's a job. Like, social media is a full-time job. And I did it for a while, and I got burned out, particularly during the pandemic. And I got to wind back up again.
Yeah, you're right. The pandemic, I was like, I'm out on this whole thing. I mean, I was basically retired from society during the pandemic. There were so many, it was so annoying that when the country shut down, I was like, all right, that's it. I'm like, I'm going to a log cabin, and I can't trust these people. If they're going to shut down society, I have no regard for them. But I think, I don't know. We're not going back there. I'll tell you that right now.
Oh my God.
People, you have people that, you start to see it. My wife just said, I'm seeing more people with the masks on. There's like, there's a certain segment of our society that wants to go back into that mentality. They were the happiest when we were in a place, but it was terrible. And I wanted to do live dates, but nobody could do them. Like, they wouldn't let us in the clubs. Yeah. But I was like, I knew people who would come to see me, but it was like, and then finally, when it took almost like 2 years, I booked the club date, and then I promoted it on Facebook. And I remember I said, this is, live show, come see me. And Facebook put a warning on my shows. They said, because this shows you, people like Facebook, they don't want people congregating in live spaces. They want everything on the screens, right? Because that's what they do.
It is amazing at how effective these websites are. 'Cause I'll wake up in the middle of the night and just start scrolling, and all of a sudden an hour goes by, and you're just like a mouse going for that little hit of cocaine, screaming that button.
Yeah. So let's get into the modern era here. Okay. You've got, let's start. I'm just going to go up to the front and then go backwards with a couple of these. All right. Because we're going to talk about what you're doing now. So what? Beneath the Surface, that was a movie you did?
That must have been a short.
Okay. 2017. That's a movie. On Hiatus, Pleasant Events. What's the other show you're doing? You're like, are you still doing that?
So I was doing Live Rescue for A&E. And that was, if you remember, Live PD, where they would follow police officers. We would follow first responders on our show. And we did that. And that was right before the pandemic. And we actually shot during the pandemic, which was unbelievable to pull it off, because, obviously first responders are still going out. Yeah. But our show, we would shoot in New York at the A&E studios. And so they said, well, you can't fly. We can't have you all in a studio. So I built a studio out in the old garage guest house. And so I would shoot, they'd have a tech guy come set up the cameras and leave. And it was a remote, internet PTZ camera, but I was stationary in a green screen. Our other hosts were in New Orleans and St. Louis. They'd have the production in New York. And then we were still in 10 cities. And it was, because you're doing it delayed live, we were using phones to try to prevent the microphone lag. It was a really interesting technological challenge that they overcame, and great to do it during the pandemic. And then it was just COVID and overdoses. So the show just went away. Yeah. It was very frustrating, but
with the Fox stuff, like Greg and me and everybody, when Greg did the 5, they all did it from trucks. The truck would pull up to their house and it was like a TV truck. So they get in
Yeah.
the back of a van, and it's not a huge van. People couldn't believe it. They're like, "That's a TV truck." It's like, they don't need a lot now because the cameras are tiny, and then you have those little lights, you know. So the van would pull up, and I would get in, and I did all my Fox News shows from a truck outside my house.
Oh my God.
So, you know, they now that's a huge company. They can do all that. But then most of us built these studios because of that.
Yeah.
We were, you know, finally I was like, I better get my my home studio in gear, you know.
Well, that's what's been interesting too, is realizing we all, you know, you got a 4K broadcast studio in our hands.
Yeah.
And just starting out, and then, you know, the ability to dress it up and with green screen, it really is amazing. I think, you know, Sam Roberts from Jim and Sam, like he built a studio in his house, and he's doing WWE stuff from there now. And it really is incredible because, you know, what we're also seeing is how everyone is like, where do we cut costs? And if you're like, I can shoot from my house with lighting, I can run it there, then you become a lot more attractive. Where, I mean, have you gone and done local news lately where there are no people on the floor? All the cameras are remote controlled.
Yeah.
The people on camera are doing their own makeup, micing themselves, writing their own scripts. It is, everything is getting down where you got to be a one-man band because the days of, you know, 30 people coming out, them choosing your wardrobe, it's like, no, go into your closet, pick something that fits, and get on camera.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's amazing. And that's what a lot of the Fox Nation stuff that we shoot, they're the robot cameras. So, you know, it'll just be me in a studio, and they you know, in the control room, they can kind of run the whole thing. So,
but I miss having people in the room.
Yeah.
Especially because we're trying to be funny, and you're like, at least a titter or a smile or something helps. Like the other
That's what's great about Red Eye was that we didn't have an audience, but I loved it because you were trying to make there was enough people in the room, the cameramen. If we could make the cameramen laugh.
Yeah.
And because we had a panel, so we had 3 or 4 people on the panel, and then we had 3 or 4 camera and sound guys. So, you know, we'd say, just have a conversation. So it was like being in a noisy bar at times. Yeah. And so, you know, it had that kind of energy. Have you pitched shows? Have you like become a producer?
Pitched a few, sold a couple, one shot a pilot. That was a while ago. Just had a couple get close, one at Netflix close.
Yeah.
Close. Lots of close stuff, Tom.
Yeah.
You know, we love it. This is incredible. Can't wait. Silence.
Yeah, exactly. But are you in it? Like, do they want, if you pitch something, are they like, no, we want you in
most of the stuff I'm pitching, I'm in. Yeah. I'm in. There've been a couple where it was kind of either spinoffs or things I would see, but nothing has nothing's materialized. A couple more that are, you know, we're waiting on notes back, but it's such an interesting business where, you know, they'll give you, like, you'll talk to a network and like, this is what we want. And you tailor a pitch to them and they're like, well, not like that. This is exactly what you told us.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's also a lot of people want what's familiar, but they want it to be completely original. And, you know, what shocks me is I still think there are very few people who are confident enough to say, I know what will break through.
Yeah.
That's unlike anything. And I'll take a shot at it. I think most people are kind of, you know, looking around. It's just such a time of, I feel like big risks aren't happening on big platforms.
Yeah.
You know what I would say.
Oh, there goes my thing. I turned off my thing and then it dings. I guess because I put it for 45 minutes or something.
It always gives us notice.
Oh, we're there. Oh, we're already at 53. So, you know, we did pretty good.
We did it, Tom.
Oh, you know what I didn't talk about was the what's the show you did with Paul Scheer and those guys, the sports show.
I did The League. I did one episode and it was so fun. And it was my scene was with Nick Kroll. It was at LAX and I was a cop. And he says bomb, and then like I arrest him, and I'm like, wait, we're filming at LAX. We're there, like they just shut off part of the drop-off area, and you know he's yelling bomb. I'm like, it's not a bomb. You said bomb. I'm like, this feels dangerous, guys, because they're, you know, I know the airport people are aware, but everyone else who's driving by has to be thinking, what the hell is going on? It's really been fun. I think. That's stuff I get a kick out of. I get a kick out of, you know, when you get to step into somebody's world like that. And those guys,
I know they came from like they were like the UCB crowd in New York. And so, did you know those guys before you did the league?
Yeah.
Who were some of the guys that you started with that like when I came
Aisha Tyler was one. Aisha Tyler, do you remember Aisha? She did the Scoop, and she's just on that Jennifer Garner Apple show. She still does Whose Line, I think, is it anyway?
So she started on the Soup with you.
She was on the Soup. We just started stand-up comedy together.
Yeah.
I remember like Steve Byrne was around. There are a lot of people like Dane Cook. So I was in LA when Dane Cook was blowing up.
Yes.
When LA, I still think New York is the comedy king.
Yeah.
But LA had, especially in the early aughts, there were a lot of people, I think, and a lot of who come from New York or Boston.
Yeah.
But there was a great comedy scene, and it's picking back up, but it's just there aren't enough venues out here like there is in New York, and there's not enough people. New York, it always feels like you can have 10 clubs in a night, all with an audience.
Yeah.
And in LA, it's like, yeah, you'll get 4 or 5 clubs on a Friday, Saturday night. But it's just, you're out here because you want to do TV.
Yeah.
Is really what it comes down to.
Yeah. So that's it. What else is happening? What's the latest project?
I'm getting married. I'm getting married for the first time. I know. I'm 53. I finally found someone. So getting married September 1st of this year, which I'm really excited about. She's a lawyer and she's awesome. I felt like I waited to find her. So it's cool. And then, we're obviously, she's about to turn 40. And so we're already kind of trying for kids. So we'll see. Either we're going all in marriage and kids, or we're just going to have a really fun time. So
that'd be great. I hope you have some little ones. I had my first at 40. So,
you give me hope, Tom. Listen, when people are like, you're going to be an old dad, I'm like, well, it's that or nothing. I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
So I found someone who I think would be a great mom. And so we're hopeful.
How to Be Tom Shalhoub, a podcast starring me, Tom Shalhoub. Each week, I explore a topic or speak with someone I find interesting, someone I think you could learn from. By listening, you might gain some insight into what it's like to be Tom Shalhoub.